Paul, welcome to CFO at Home. Thanks for your time today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
So, your approach to talking about college and college planning, I've probably done at least 10 episodes on this subject, but your approach is unique in that one of the things that caught my eye is you say, think like a CFO, not just a parent. And with this being CFO at home, I really want to get into what that means because I think we're kindred spirits in that way. But before we get into that, I also understand that your interest in college planning and making wise choices during college planning comes from personal experience. I'd love to hear a bit about that.
Yeah, like everybody, we are our past, right? We become who we become because of where we've been. So, yeah, I was blessed enough. I had a middle class family. My dad went to college, got a master's degree, did very well. My mom went to college, ended up not finishing, but had a really good upbringing, and the expectation was you go to college. But that wasn't my focus in high school. I was busy with a lot of other stuff, enjoying my time with my friends and things like that. I finally buckled down a little bit my senior year and took some extra classes, toughed it out. But I didn't do any college applications until about 6 months too late. So when I was looking at, okay, what's the next step, I had very few options because I had already missed the application cycle, missed all the deadlines, missed the financial aid, everything. I didn't do any of it on time. So I had very few options to go to. I went out to ended up going to a reasonably good local university. They were okay. Academically, while I slacked off some in high school, generally I'm a relatively smart guy. So academically I wasn't challenged, right? So I ended up needing to transfer. We took on some debt. I did end up with two majors in finance and management, which was nice. Had to change majors during college, like just all of the bad decisions you could make other than maybe not going to college. I made them. So what that resulted in is my wife and I, when we got married and we're trying to start a family, and I'm trying to build the financial planning business and everything else that I'm doing, we were paying those student loans for a very long time, right? So while we're trying to finance our wedding, we're still paying those student loans. While we're trying to buy our first house, we're still paying those student loans. While we have our first kid, we're still paying those student loans. And it's just digging out of them and digging out of them and digging out of them. I don't want other people to have to go through that. So when I was going through the first few years of any business build or any career, you're usually underpaid for the hours that you're spending doing it. And that's exactly where I was. And luckily, so now it's working out well. The education I got definitely pays off and is a good thing. But I don't want other families to go through that same path where, because they didn't do the proper planning ahead of time, their students are burdened with too much loans. They're not on the right path. They'd have to take a fifth and a sixth year because they transferred or they changed majors or anything like that. We want to get as many of those kinks out of the way before they start college so that they can be on the right path. And that's the biggest thing for families is it's not just you've seen college prices out there. It's anywhere from 50 to $100,000 for 1 year for one student, right? And we would expect over the next few years there's going to be a number of schools that might break that $100,000 mark. There's quite a few in the upper 90s right now. When that happens, one student might be $400,000 for an education. And that's where, when we add on that fifth and that sixth year, because we didn't do proper planning, national average right now for a 4 year bachelor degree is 5.8 years. That means half of the families that are entering college right now need to be planning for 6 or more years. And I don't want my clients to be that half that has to plan for those extra years. So it's not just that it might be 50,000 for the fifth year and 50,000 for the sixth year. That's 2 years that student should be in their career. They should be developing that first job experience. Then they should be earning money in those years. So a lot of bachelor's degrees right now lead to a job that might be 60, 70, 80, maybe even $100,000 per year. So it's not just the tuition that's missing. It's the extra 2 years of income and the extra 2 years of experience that kid should have that they miss out on if they didn't do proper college planning in high school.
Yeah, and before we go forward, I think it's noteworthy that you were a finance major as you were going to school. You are self admittedly, and just from our brief interaction here, I can testify you're an intelligent individual. But even with that financial education, it sounds like your parents were college educated as well.
Hmm.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so your parents were college educated. You're obviously very bright. You're a finance major, for the love of Pete. And even you fell into this trap. So while I really want to focus our conversation on families that maybe the person listening is a first generation college student, or these are parents who didn't have the opportunity to go to college that aspire for their kids to go to college,
Mhm.
and maybe they're feeling a little unprepared and maybe a little ashamed that they don't know more. There is no shame in this, because even coming from your background as a finance major, you fell into some of the traps here that we're going to talk about. So this is sticky stuff. So I just wanted to say that up front,
Yeah.
and your background and your story frames that very well. So I want to get into the whole think like a CFO approach here, because again, this is CFO at home. And when we talk in general financial terms about approaching your life to be the CFO at home, what we're talking about is approaching your finances with intention, with a plan, with targets like CEOs have, and also making sure that there is stakeholder buy-in, so to speak, in terms of the family all pulling in the right direction. When you talk about think like a CFO as far as college planning is concerned, how do you define that?
Yeah, I'll tell you a story about a little more about my career that shows it exactly how I think about it. So I was doing financial planning and college planning for families probably 6 or 7 years before I had my first son. So my son Luke, when we're recording this, he's 11 years old. My daughter Olivia, she's 8. I love them. They're wonderful kids. And I would sit with families who they have a couple of car payments. Maybe they have a little bit of credit card debt or home equity line of credit. They haven't even come close to paying off their mortgage. Maybe they saved some money for retirement, and maybe they even saved some money for college. But for their 2 kids, they're looking at a quarter million, or if they have 3 or 4 kids, it might even be a $500,000 that they need to come up with for their kids' college. And all the money they saved in their college fund is like $30,000 or $50,000. They're nowhere close to saving up enough to do it. And I would look at these families and I'm like, you want me to do what? Like, why would you do all this work in your financial life to spend all this money on the kids when there's some cheaper options out there? And I did the work and I'm very good at doing the work. So I was able to do it and help them get exactly what they were looking to do, which is an amazing thing for them. But I didn't get it, right? And then my son Luke was born. We were in the hospital, my wife Christina, and I held Luke. And I've loved my wife for a long time. I've loved my family. I've never loved anything like I loved my Luke the first time I held him, right? It's a different kind of love. I want to do everything I can to help him succeed. And I did take a little bit of time off of work, but a couple of weeks later, I went back in the office. I'm helping some more clients, and that's when it clicked. That's all these families are trying to do. They're just trying to give the best opportunity to their kid that they possibly can, right? And they are willing to sacrifice themselves. They are willing to retire 8 years later because their kid needed to they wanted their kid to go to college, right? They're willing to make those sacrifices and dig deeper in debt than they already were because of that. And that's where we all have a great love for our children. We all, and from a humanity perspective, that is absolutely fantastic. And I believe that is a great thing, right? But it clouds our judgment on how we use money to help our kids, right? And what I've found is with proper planning, you can achieve college and do the cool vacations you want to do with your family and still retire at a reasonable age if we plan ahead and we think it through before we do that. And that's a lot of what thinking like a CFO about that college planning process is. Most people with a high school student have never even laid out year by year how much money they might need for their kids' educations, let alone how they're going to come up with the money. But that's exactly what a CFO would do. They would be looking at, here's the expected expenses, here's the different places money could come from, here's how we get more money, lower the bill, right? There's a way that we can lower the bill. We want to do all of those different things, just like a CFO would be doing for a company or for a family. They'd be looking at, how do we lower the bill? How do we pay the rest? And how do we make sure we're prepared ahead of time for it, for the things that could go wrong or could go a little bit differently than what we planned? And that's what I am able to help families do.
And like any planning process, it's one thing if you're starting that planning when your kid is, let's take the best case scenario, when your kid is born and you've got a nice 18-year runway to do that planning. That's going to necessitate one plan, 529s and all those things. I love that it seems like you're as equally concerned, if not more. You mentioned high school student. So you work with, I assume, a lot of people who haven't done a lot of that pre planning. And when we talk about planning like a CFO, if you are planning for your kid just being born, maybe a person's hearing that is, I can do a little research. I got plenty of runway. I'm enlightened on that. I can do that. If a person is dealing with a kid who's in middle school or high school, maybe the first thought is, oh crap, I don't have time to do any of that. Again, my heart is still there. I still remember the day this kid was born. We've been building up to this time, and just by any means necessary, I'm going to get him that education. I love that what you're promoting is that even if you're planning later in the process like that, you don't have to throw a methodical, logical way of thinking about this out of the window. There's still time to think like a CFO. So let's take that scenario. Let's take a person who is not, for many reasons, done the proper pre planning. Their kid is starting 10th grade. It's, oh crap, this is coming up a lot quicker than I thought. I've had this dream that my kid would go to my alma mater, let's say, and it's, I don't know, Duke or something.
Sure.
Or I'm a first generation person. Maybe I didn't go to college. I always wanted my kid to get a great college education and go to an Ivy League school. And they're pretty good in school and all of that good stuff. If clients come to you in that scenario, how do you walk them through the first steps of doing proper planning?
Yeah, so the first step of proper planning is saying, yes, I want to do it, right? Once we decide we need that plan done, a fair assessment of where you're at is where it always starts, right? So, how'd you get where you're at is part of that story. And what I always tell families that have that sophomore in high school, that we're doing late stage college planning, is that's normal. That's everybody. Nobody figured this out when they had an elementary student. And think back when the kids were young, you're just trying to survive, right? You're trying to get some sleep at night. You're trying to figure out this parenthood thing. And you have this infant, and then you have this toddler that is just wrecking havoc on your house. And there's other great things that we need to do to help that child and help them develop. And they get into elementary school, and you've taken these amazing trips with your students and spent the quality time together, and you try to get them the development sometimes in sports or in music, wherever else we're trying to enhance our kids' education. So it's not that they, and maybe you need, you have a couple of kids now, so you need a bigger vehicle, and maybe you need a bigger house, and all these different things to build a better life for your family. So it's not like they wasted all the money at the casino. It's they spent it on good things that were more urgent. So by the time they come to me with a sophomore in high school, it's just the next urgent thing that they need to figure out. And most of the time, they spent it on really good things for their kids, really good things for their family up until that point, and they want to continue that, right? They've made a lot of the good financial decisions that they knew how to make, right? Everybody said to put money in their retirement account, so that's what they maybe did. So by the time they meet me, some people maybe talk to somebody and they said, "Hey, you should put in $600 or $800 per kid into your 529." And they said, "The budget's tight. We barely make any money and we have to pay for our kids' stuff. we can put $100 a month in for each kid, or a couple hundred, or whatever it is, right? And they get to high school and they are looking at the bills and they don't have nearly enough money. So we start by doing an assessment of where they're at, where there's the direction that the student's going. So one of the things that we love about the way we work with families is families who come in and work with our program. We have certified counselors who are meeting with the students through the Independent Education Counselors Association, that are meeting with the students to get them right on the right path. So there's really two different train tracks that are going, if you think of it that way, and they both meet at college. One is working with a counselor, a full time, they're there for that student type counselor that can spend the one on one time with them to develop the right path. So, when we're developing the right path for a student, we want the right cultural fit. We need them on the right campus. We need the right curriculum. We need the right classes, the right major, the right program of study that's at that student's level. And then we need the right cost. And that's where I usually come in on the financial side of how much financial aid can we get, and how do we put together the plan of how the rest of that bill is going to get paid. And that's where we develop from that framework of having that honest assessment of where you're at. And then I have the luxury of I've spoken to thousands and thousands of people about college planning. I've personally worked with over 500 families to help them solve this college financial problem. So when I meet with a family, and it's probably been 8 or 10 years since I was surprised by a situation that looks different than what I've seen before, I get to share all of that experience from all those other families with somebody who does take advantage of our services, so that we can truly help them. It's all about choosing a right fit school. And if your listeners get nothing else out of this conversation, how much financial aid you get, the number one thing that matters is what school you choose. So if you're not choosing the right schools, that's where a lot of the myths about financial aid, we make too much money, is what people hear from their friends or neighbors. You're not going to get financial aid either. Maybe they didn't know the system, and maybe they went to the wrong college for financial aid for their family's unique situation. And that's where you mentioned the more expensive schools. The average private college discount rate is 56%. That's from the National Association of College and University Business Officers. So the average discount, the average financial aid is that the university comes up with 56%. We want to be on the high end of that, right? We want to be above average. We want to get every dollar of financial aid that a family can get. So there's no doubt when we look at different schools, we've sent students to what's a good example? NYU, and we got the cost down for a very high income family from 85,000 that year down to about 45,000. And when we have two very high income earner families, they didn't have the money saved. They could pay some out of pocket. And that's where, when you think of the universities, let's say they need to fill a certain number of students in their freshman class. And I'll ask you, if they charged everybody full price at $90,000 a year, do you think they could fill their freshman class?
Not in this economy, sir.
Probably not, right? Now, let me ask you this: if they charged everybody zero, would they be able to make their budget?
Not in this economy, sir.
No.
Or any economy at zero.
Right. So they need a large number of people in between those points, right? So even higher income families, what most people would call upper middle class kind of families, they're getting those tuition discounts if you know how to approach the process. So for other families, it's all, how do we make the on time things? How do we know the financial aid system? So if you're going to be the expert in one thing and do good at getting more financial aid, the one thing is probably how to pick the right school. The second thing is how the financial aid formulas work. And this is another big thing that most people don't realize, is there's certain places you can put money where it's going to hurt your financial aid at the universities. There's other places you can put money that doesn't count against you at all. So just an extra $10,000 in savings could increase a family's college bill between $500 and $2,500 per year. Just an extra $10,000 in savings will increase somebody's bill by $500 to $2,500 per year, depending on where they put it. And that's where that CFO style approach really hits home, is by knowing all the rules, by knowing the legal system of how it's going to work, we can make those adjustments ahead of time so that sophomore comes in. What they didn't realize is the second half of the sophomore year is counting against them as income in the financial aid formulas. So at the beginning part of the sophomore year is our last chance to tax income to do certain financial moves that's not going to count on the financial aid formulas. So it's great that sophomore came in because we have people coming with juniors and seniors. There's certain strategies we can use for sophomores that'll affect all 4 years of their college. When we do it for a senior, it's only going to affect 2 or 3 years of their college. And we love to be able to implement that and get every dollar of financial aid we can for a family.
Yeah. So I think everything that you've shared really underlines the point that having the right person counseling and guiding you through the process is important. It's paramount from the way you describe this. So I'm sure there's certain listeners who may be thinking, yeah, I really need to talk with the high school guidance
Mm-hmm.
counselor and maybe talk with the financial aid office at a couple of the schools that we're thinking about. And that'll put us on the right track. What do you think?
Yeah. So great that you're doing something, but maybe don't do that. So the issue is the high school counselors are absolutely wonderful people. We love our high school counselors. The problem is they're stretched so thin and they can only give as much knowledge as what they've seen, right? They can only share as much as what they've learned. The college counselors, the national average right now is one counselor for every 408 high school students, one counselor for over 400 students. So how much one-on-one time are they going to get, right? Now, even if they could, they would love, I promise you, most counselors I talk to, they would love to just spend their time with the A students who are going off to college, right? But they have to deal with all the social issues that are going on in the schools. They have to deal with class scheduling for everyone. That's a big part of their time, is making sure the schedules are set up for the following year. They have to deal with parent issues. They have to deal with all sorts of different issues that they would love to not have to deal with, honestly. So they just don't have enough time to do a full sit down once a month or even once a quarter with all of their students. And they definitely don't have time to sit down with the parents and figure out the budget and the financial situation of how that bill's going to get paid for. So they might be able to point you into a software that can help you look at different colleges or think about different majors. They might even do what we see a lot of counselors doing, and we can speak at these events, is just like one college night where they have a couple colleges or a couple speakers come in. They maybe set up some tables in the cafeteria so that kids can visit the different colleges and open their eyes to things they maybe didn't know. And that's great, but it doesn't replace one-on-one what is the right direction for my kid. It brings a bunch of college salespeople in to say, hey, this is a great education at my university, and the next one says this is a great education at that university, and that's pretty much all they're going to get, which is good. They're opening their eyes to more things, but it's not tailored to each individual. That's why we have to supplement with some additional help, with some additional conversations with people who know what they're doing to select the right college. And then you brought up the financial aid office. And this is one of the craziest things, because people will do exactly what you said and walk into the financial aid office and they'll say, hey, here's how much we have saved for college. Here's how much we have all this other debt. We have two other kids. This is how much money we have. We really need a break. And what you've done is you've given that financial aid officer the exact formula to figure out how much they can charge you. So we have to remember that the college financial aid, let me take a step back. Colleges are a really big, successful business. Even if they say nonprofit on their title, they are a very successful business. And if you think from the business mind of the university, their billing arm is the financial aid office. They're the ones that try to collect the money, right? So if they can fill their freshman class and give out less money, that's a win for the university, right? The university loves their big buildings. They love their endowments. They love building new things. And that's part of how they attract kids to campus. That's the number two reason why kids go to a university, is because they have nice buildings and nice new athletic centers and everything else, right? Number one is they know somebody who went there. And neither one of those should be the top reason. But that's how kids choose colleges, unfortunately, when they don't have much guidance to help them. Yeah, the financial aid office, it's kind of like going in the IRS office to do your taxes, right? If you go into the IRS office to try to get your taxes done, they're not going to be looking for every deduction that you could possibly find. They're not going to be, they might get something done and be able to sign off on it, and you probably won't get audited, right? So that's good news if you have the IRS help you with your taxes. But they're definitely not planning for next year. They're not showing you how to get better tax situation for the following years and really how to do it in your best interest. And that's what we're able to do that the financial aid office isn't. Is they're not bad people, but their job is to fill a freshman class and only give out so much in financial aid.
Yep, they're not bad people. They're just doing their job. But as a wise consumer, the parents and the student need to understand exactly what their job is. And their job, to paraphrase a movie that I was watching the other day, old movie, their plan, their mission is to get you to sign on the line which is dotted. That's the bottom line of
Yeah.
what they're doing. So as long as you understand that, do they have a part in the play? Absolutely. But not necessarily as the trusted advisor, because going back to how many people can pay $90,000 for a college, that they're going to help you to figure out how to get in that college any way possible. And they will tell you that you qualify for X amount of college aid and of financial aid, rather. And that financial aid could be true financial aid, it could be a grant. A lot of times it's loans, and they are not factoring in, when they're offering you this loan, anything about your personal financial situation. They're not looking at the ROI on the degree that you're proposing to get. They're just, again, trying to get you to sign on the line which is dotted. They're not looking at your holistic situation, which means they are not the best counselor for you. So the services that you're providing and your firm is providing, I think that underscores the importance of it. Your firm, by the way, is Bridgewise Financial Partners,
Mm-hmm.
specifically where our listeners can find more information. And this will be in the show notes, is Bridgewise CP. I assume it's college planning.
Yeah.
Bridgewise CP dot bridgewisefinancialpartners.com. And again, that will be in the show notes.
Yeah, or they can go
So,
on Google and maybe just type in Bridgewise College Planning and it'll come right up nice and easy. You'll see
all right.
what's nice about going through Google is they'll see our 5-star ratings, and that's because we're very selective of who we sign on. So I'll tell you a story real quick if you don't mind. We have
Yeah.
who came in with two seniors, actually, two very bright girls. One of them actually moved ahead to be a senior with her older sister. Both of them just great grades. Looking at it, they were lost. They didn't have a plan. They didn't have the money to pay for college. They came in for a college readiness breakthrough session at bridgewisecp.com. They can find, your listeners can find a link to sign up for a college readiness breakthrough session. When this family came in, they didn't know how to do it, right? They're top of their class. They needed a solution to help them solve this problem. And by the time they met with us, within about a month, they had a number of meetings with us, both on the student counseling side and the financial side. We're able to within 4 weeks, had a financial strategy. They had the confidence. They knew exactly how college was going to get paid for, and their students don't need any debt for undergraduate, right? Both of them are, one of them was aiming for med school. Maybe we need a little debt for med school to get through that, but that's a whole different conversation. We can get through that undergraduate education. And it's just such an amazing transformation for families to have that peace, to have that financial security that they're making the good decisions and the path they're on is going to work. So we love to be able to provide that to people.
I'm so glad you shared that story, because I'm sure that there may be listeners who are thinking, wow, I'm just trying to scrape up money to send my kid to college. The idea of paying someone for advice seems doesn't seem like the right direction to go in. Again, I will bring up the phrase ROI. So for what they're paying for the information, and I urge anybody to look at it this way, have a conversation. I'm sure a conversation with someone like you is free initially, a
Yeah.
consultation. And based on that consultation, ask yourself, do I stand to save more than what I am paying this person? I and in so many cases, just knowing the amount of college debt and the cost of college, if you can answer that question and say, "Yeah, I think this gives me a good chance to do that," I just urge listeners to investigate
Yeah.
and not let some preconceived notion that I can't afford this stop them, because I don't know, maybe you can't, but maybe you can't afford not to, as they say.
Right,
So,
and that's where
yeah.
Vince, I'll actually piggyback on that because we do even better. So we do charge a few $1,000s for our services, anywhere between $3,000 and $8,000 for depending on how much help a family wants or needs. We don't recommend our services for most people. So when people go through the college readiness breakthrough session, only about 3 out of every 10 people actually get the opportunity to work with us because we're selective of who we want to sign on for our services. If we don't see that ROI, we're thinking like a CFO, right? If we're not going to see a major impact, we're looking for a 10 times multiple of that money for this family. If they sign on for our services, then we recommend them for services. If we're not seeing a big multiple on that, we're going to point them in the right direction and give them a few tips, and they can use our free resources, and they're going to do well enough. And that's why we look for that. There's two reasons we have almost all 5-star reviews online. One is, I'll brag a little bit, we're pretty awesome at what we do, and I've built an amazing team here who can handle everything that the clients are looking for. So that's one reason. But the bigger reason, I think, is we're very selective on who we sign on. So we're only going to sign on families that by the end of the process, they're thrilled with us and they're going to tell their friends about us and they're going to give us good reviews. And we're not just selective with who we sign on based on if we can help them. We also just don't want jerks to sign on, right? So we want to sign on nice people who we enjoy meeting with and everything like that too. So if your listener is a nice family who, would be really enjoys making good financial decisions, just go to bridgewisecp.com or search Google for Bridgewise College Planning. Click on that college readiness breakthrough session. They'll be able to take advantage. We'll look through their financial part of college. We'll look through the student part of college. We'll really assess where they're at and if it is something that we could help them with, and definitely answer all their questions. We'll run financial aid at different schools and show them what that picture looks like and what they're up against in the college planning process. I've never had a family get better results by delaying, by doing it later, right? So we'll sign on students for our counseling as soon as junior high because we're setting up what they're going to do in high school, and all of that goes on the college resume. You mentioned it earlier that when the kid was born is when you should have started on the financial side. I take it one further, at least when you're pregnant, you could have started. But yeah, we want people who want to take control of their plan as soon as possible. So listeners can start by searching Google for Bridgewise College Planning and taking advantage of that college readiness breakthrough session.
And the fact that you're saying that you take on relatively few clients as a percentage
Oh
because
yeah.
of your vetting process, but no one comes away without guidance, that really speaks to the heart of what you're doing. And not only is it your heart, I think it's good business, because for
Sure.
every person that you can help, but you give them helpful tips, they're going to tell their friends, and they're
Oh
going to
yeah.
tell their friends, they're going to tell their friends, and one of those friends may qualify. So it's win win. It's doing business in the most ethical way possible with the higher mission in mind. Paul, it's been a real pleasure to have this conversation with somebody who has that heart. This whole think like a CFO strategy, I love how it naturally extends to college planning and
Yeah.
really how you've articulated it and framed it that way. Thanks for your time. Thanks for being on CFO at Home today.
Thank you, Vince.